Hello and welcome to another one of my readings from one of my stories. Today we are reading Happily Ever After, which is a story in my Subverting Tropes series, the fourth one, and it tackles the trope of marriage law. The rating is mature, the relationships are Luna, Harry and Ginny, Astoria, Draco, and Hermione and Ron, though all these relationships are in the background. It's more of a Jen story. Let's get started. Kingsley was the interim minister for magic for 6 months immediately following the Battle of Hogwarts. He did a great job, yet he didn't win the election that followed. Some pillock named Ebenezer Grimes won instead on a program that promised a complete return to normal in record time. Ebenezer Grimes had just conveniently forgotten to mention exactly how he meant to do this. "This can't be happening," Hermione grumbled, while she held the Daily Prophet in a death grip as she had her nose buried in the front page. All around the great hall there were whispers and shouts of outrage. "What is happening?" Harry asked, just as Ginny slid into the seat beside him. She pressed a quick kiss to his cheek before filling her plate with eggs and sausage. "That utter twat has passed a marriage law," Hermione all but shouted. "What?" Ginny shrieked, almost ripping the paper out of Hermione's hands. "What the hell is a marriage law?" Ron asked, while giving Harry a questioning look. Harry shrugged in response because he had no idea either. "Listen to this," Hermione said through gritted teeth. "In order to repopulate the wizarding world, the ministry will select the best-suited couples and marry them in a mass ceremony at Hogwarts in 3 weeks' time. It is then expected that all couples shall become pregnant within the next year." "The fuck?" Harry said, while Ginny made a sound much like a death gurgle. "They can't do that." "They're doing it, Harry." Hermione looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "They actually passed that law just yesterday." Harry sat back, his entire body drawing up, while his mind focused like it had rarely done before. "Laws can be unmade, Hermione." "How?" Hermione all but shrieked, while Ginny was shaking her head in sheer denial. "How are you going to convince them?" "I'm not," Harry said, voice cold with quiet fury. "I am going to make them." He stood up and looked at the other tables. "First, we need a council of war." "Of war?" Hermione asked, voice suddenly small. Harry glared at her and then gestured around the hall. "In case you hadn't realized it, the ministry is actively trying to enslave us and force us to have sex against our will. Yes, this is war." "Hell yes, this is war." Draco Malfoy stepped up to the table. And Harry wasn't in the least bit surprised Draco, of all people, took this so poorly. Draco had started dating Daphne Greengrass's younger sister Astoria just a few months ago, and those two were ridiculously infatuated with each other. Everyone joked about it whenever they saw them together. "Whatever you need, Harry, Slytherin House stands with you." "As does Hufflepuff," Susan Bones said as she got up from their table. "And Ravenclaw," Luna Lovegood said while she walked towards them. "Harry, what do you need?" "I need an army," Harry said with a sly smile that slowly morphed into a grin. They started with a meeting of the War Council, as they dubbed it. McGonagall gave them all the day off to start planning. She was as appalled by these recent developments as they were, so she was happy to go along with whatever they needed. And since they were all 8th-year students anyway, they could miss a few days of classes. "Worst case scenario, we fight," Hermione said. "But let's try to come up with solutions that could prevent the fighting." They were seated in the Chamber of Secrets, which Harry could still open since he had retained the ability to speak Parseltongue. Since the chamber was far underground, it functioned as a perfect bunker and was now officially their war room. They transfigured a large round table at which they all sat. "How do they even think they can force us?" Ron asked no one in particular. "Just imagine for a moment that they manage to marry us to their selections. All we then have to do is still date the people we want and have babies with them. They can't bloody well place a guard next to our beds, now can they?" Harry snickered, as did many others. I'd like to see them try, Ginny snapped. She'd been very on edge ever since the announcement, perhaps because she stood to lose not one but two lovers. It's going to be fine, Luna said, and placed her hand on Ginny's thigh, giving it a few comfortable rubs. Trust in Harry. We tell them what we think of this law, Harry said, keeping half an eye on his two girlfriends. We give them no room for negotiation, and we lay down our law. The only acceptable solution is a complete retraction of the marriage law, nothing less. Harry looked around the table, taking his time to meet every single person's eyes. Draco's flinty grey ones, Lavender's brown ones set in a scarred face. Susan's eyes were filled with an unending amount of grief over having lost her entire family. Harry looked at everyone and said, "We did not put our lives on the line to win our freedom, only to hand it over to a bunch of ministry twats." "Hear, hear," Draco said loudly, slamming his fist on the table. "Fuck the ministry." "Fuck the ministry," echoed around the table. It had become their unofficial motto. "What if we lose the fight?" Padma asked in a small voice, giving her sister Parvati a worried look. Harry understood the sisters didn't want to even think of losing each other. Everyone saw how much Dennis Creevy still missed his big brother Colin. "If we lose, we leave the country," Harry said in a reassuring tone. He held up a hand when some looked like they wanted to protest. "I know none of us want to leave the country we fought so hard to protect. But I'd much rather move to mainland Europe somewhere than let the ministry dictate who I can marry or not." "Agreed," Ron said, while Ginny and Hermione nodded furiously. Neville, who'd been quiet up until that point, spoke up. "And we'll take our extended family with us when we leave. I am not leaving Gran behind." "Exactly," Luna agreed at once. "Daddy will come with us." "So will our entire family," Ron added. "So it's settled," Hermione concluded. "We tell them to drop the law. If they refuse, we fight." "We've got 3 weeks to practice," Harry said with a satisfied grin. "I say we restart the DA. That gives us plenty of time to whip everyone back into shape." And that is what they did. Outside of classes, Harry and his friends prepared the entire school to go to battle with the ministry. Even the first years were taught disarming charms and stunners, but mostly how to duck and take cover. The older years, though, were drilled to duel without mercy. "This is where we make our stand," Harry kept saying to every one of his students. "We cannot let the ministry enslave us. It's worth fighting for, and it's worth dying for." No one disagreed with him. The 3 weeks until the ministry was to show up for their matchmaking and mass marriage ceremony flew by. "They won't be able to enter the castle without my express permission," McGonagall assured him. "Where will you meet them, Mr. Potter?" "In the doorway." And that is exactly where Harry stood when the Minister for Magic and his entourage approached the castle. All the other students had spread out across the hallways, hanging out of every single window and standing guard behind the balustrade at the top of the walls. Harry stood alone, for now, but just out of sight. Inside the entrance hall stood the War Council. When Minister Grimes greeted Harry with a cheerful wave, Harry responded by drawing his wand. Every single student did the same, and within moments the ministry delegation had over 500 wands aimed at them. "That's far enough, Mr. Grimes," Harry said, his hand never wavering. "Harry, think about what you're doing," Kingsley said. He was there in the capacity of head of magical law enforcement, a job he was assigned after he lost the election. "I know exactly what I'm doing, thanks." Harry narrowed his eyes while he stared at Grimes, whose expression was stuck somewhere between befuddled disbelief and abject terror. "We will not be enslaved. We will not be controlled. If you try to force us, we will fight." Harry's eyes became mere slits as he stared Grimes down. "And I will kill you personally, Minister. That's a promise." "How dare you?" Grimes snarled, though he took a small step back at the same time. Harry snorted. I faced Voldemort himself more than once, and you think I would have trouble doing the same with some perverted ministry twat? Pervert! Several students yelled around the castle, immediately followed by a chorus of "Fuck the ministry!" You cannot be serious, Grimes said, looking around as though he had never seen anyone stand up to him before. This will not stand. Mr. Shacklebolt, do something. Kingsley looked between Grimes and the castle full of shouting students and back. What would you like me to do? Fight all 500 of them? I'd like to see you try, more than one student yelled in a straight-out dare. Or should I just chuck them all into Azkaban? How will you force them to get married and make babies then? I'm told that the mentors make you lose your libido faster than your will to live. Grimes huffed and puffed and then pointed a trembling arm at Harry. At least arrest their ringleader. He's alone. He is not alone, Ron said, stepping into view and coming to a halt beside Harry. Hermione followed, and Ginny, Luna, Neville, Draco, Theo, Parvati, Padma, Terry, Anthony, Susan, Hannah, Ernie, Justin, and finally McGonagall herself. You do realize these are all veterans of the Battle of Hogwarts, right? Kingsley said as he leaned a little closer to Grimes. Good luck bringing them in alive. We're not coming in alive, Neville said, voice as solid as a rock. This is where we make our stand. Fuck the ministry! We fight or we die, Ginny yelled. Fuck the ministry! Get rid of that heinous law, Hermione demanded, her arms crossed, though she kept her wand in hand. It is nothing but a poorly disguised excuse to enslave us all. We wouldn't let Voldemort enslave us, Luna said with a distant smile, and he was a lot scarier than you are. Leave, don't come back, and repeal that law, Harry said, his blazing eyes never leaving Grimes's face. If you don't, we will eventually come to you. Just something to think about. Fuck the ministry! Grimes and his entourage finally retreated, and the whole of Hogwarts cheered their departure on, shooting off sparks and Weasley fireworks in celebration. The next morning, the Daily Prophet had a huge headline that said, "Controversial marriage law thrown out." Good, Hermione said, folding the newspaper with a satisfied smile. Now we can go back to what really matters, preparing for our newts. Harry sat in between his girlfriends and took a bite of eggs. Honestly, what were those ministry twats thinking, challenging the freedom of a whole bunch of war veterans? How had they honestly expected this to go in any other way? Well, Harry didn't care. They had their freedom back, and that's all that mattered. The end. Thank you for listening. I will be posting more stories, both in the Subverting Tropes series and my other work. If you don't want to miss anything, please subscribe. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.